Okay. Thank you, everybody. My name is Tariq Juneja, and I'm a mind mapping instructor. And I'd like to talk to you today about what mind mapping is, why it's so important and useful, how you can use it in your lives, and what it can do for you. Okay. So to begin, I'm going to do a few slides initially on a presentation on PowerPoint on my laptop. And what I'll be doing is I'll be going over the why mind mapping is so successful and how the human brain functions best using this methodology and why I've chosen it, and then going into the principles of how it works, and any questions and answers you have at any point, please feel free to just ask me, and I'll answer your questions. And also at the end, there'll be an opportunity to do some mind maps with me, where we can actually take a look at it, and then we can have a question and answer session at the end of it. So to kick off, Professor Tony Buzan started this, I think it was about 30 years ago. So it is quite old, it's been around for a long while. There have been a few improvements, but it's still, in terms of principles, a very effective way for certain areas for a human being in terms of thinking, cognition, problem solving, studying techniques, even business practices. So these are all things that mind mapping can really help you with. So I'll just go on to the next stage. So this is a mind map. And this is the first mind map I'm actually showing you all. And it embodies the main principles that are the most effective in mind mapping. And what we've got there is a mind map with a central image. That central image is of Professor Tony Buzan. And what it then details as the branches go out is all the different things that Tony Buzan does. So this is really a mind map about Tony Buzan, a comprehensive, complete mind map of all the areas of interest to people. So at this point, I'd like to just stop and I'd like you to ask a question. What would you say the natural human language is? If I was to ask you what a human language is, what would you say that would be? Anything comes to mind? What give me a language. Is there anything?
Sounds.
Sounds, okay, excellent. That's really good, yeah, okay, that's natural language. Anything else, or is that it? Okay. Most people think and visually. So the neuroscience is very clear that it's images and association. That's really the natural human language. When we come to German, Italian, Hindi, English, whatever, we're really at that point linguistically talking about subroutines of a language used for communication between people. But it isn't the natural language. The natural language is really image and association. And it's how those two things come in within the human brain to create the natural languaging pattern that you're using to process information for yourself. So that's the basis for the visual component of mind mapping and what we're doing with it. Now, in this mind map, you can see we talk about achievements and all the things Professor Buzan's done. We can see the books he's authored, the mission. You'll notice that there's one central big image in the middle, because the brain functions best with the centralized image from which it radiates other images or keywords. The image is really translating in the human brain into a keyword, which is one simple thing. And that's at the core component as a principle for mind mapping, how we are basically translating the information and how we're recording and presenting it. So you can see with Tony Buzan, he's an advisor, media, intelligence, and what you've been able to do is you've been able to see details about him as an educator, what he's doing with students, with adults, with children, with sportsmen, detailing all the different types of areas in which he does sports. And the beauty of this kind of comprehensive gestalt is, at any point we can add something or we can take something away. So it provides a holistic view. Once you have that holistic view, you're able to drill down further if you're doing study or you're problem solving, where you can put more detail in it as you need it for the specific area that you're looking at or discipline that you're focusing on. So this is Phil Chambers, again a mind map of him and what he does. And then this one is a biography of me, which I'll try and get up there. Okay, so this is me. This is where I'm detailing a mind map of me, what my experiences are, what my background is, my mother, my father, my sister, my family, things I can add on there, qualifications, all my qualifications, my degree, my professional qualifications, down to my career, things I'm interested in terms of my mission, my quest, what I'm doing, all the different things I'm interested in. The retreats are all listed here. So as you build these kinds of maps, because they're so comprehensive and visual, it's very easy to be able to identify and pick areas in which you want to put more focus or you need more information, and you're able to get to that immediately. In a way that with linear information, in a way where with your reading or your writing, it's a lot more hard, arduous to be able to do that. So it's more difficult. And that's why it's so appealing. And you will see, as you can see here, with these two lovely children, that human beings innately, from a young age, naturally know this. They're doing this naturally. But through a process of the Industrial Revolution and reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever, a lot of what we do is a lot more rigorous and analytical in just one sphere of human intellect. We're not encompassing the whole range. And part of mind mapping's goal is to encompass more of the range of human faculties and to build that in so it's easier for a person to reflect their natural thinking and cognition processes and solve things. So this is really about metacognition. It's about the thinking of thinking and being able to think about your thinking in a way that improves your ability to do things that you want, whether it's in studying, creativity, business problems, whatever the area may be. You can use this as a Swiss Army knife. Okay, so that's a bit about me on the mind map, and now I need to just go back to the other one. Okay, so that's there. So and so to begin with, like with all study things, we want to give you a complete picture of the whole overview of what we're looking at over the next 40 minutes, 50 minutes. So really the introduction, we talked about a biography and outline. We're talking about the presentation, what the goal is of the presentation to give people certification, how you recall, what the neuroscience points to in terms of the steady techniques for the best recall, how texts are made up, what the applications are, when to take breaks, and what the rules for mind mapping are and how to use them personally for an individual. And so this is going to detail some of those things. So it'll give you the practical information you need to be able to create your own mind maps and to start building on that. Okay, so that's what the next few minutes are going to really cover, and that's the overview. So this is a really core important point, especially for traditional Western systems of education. We focus totally on the right-hand side here. We focus on symbols, linear patterning, words, numbers, and analysis. And it served us well to a degree. However, as things go on, we're still reaching a point where human endeavor has neglected a lot of other areas, such as the Gestalt process, where human beings are constantly craving a complete picture, as best of a completion of an idea or a thing as they can get, as they're doing something, because we don't think in terms of zeros and ones. We think in terms of patterns. We think in terms of patterns of things, and the more of an overview we have, the easier it is for our minds to go through that patterning process. So you can see here there's Gestalt, then there's the visual elements, which is rhythm, patterns, then you have colors, then you have the association of all these things. You have imagination, images, space, and dimension. So I'll really just come off here a bit and just say, historically we all know, if you look at Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, if you look at all the pantheons of the geniuses of the world, the visual imagery that they all put in their journals, the amount of detail they put in with color, with pictures, with detail is very high. When they developed the benzene ring, it was a visual image that came to him. If you look at the latest technologies now, only yesterday, PCI Perimeter and NASA produced the first visual images of the event horizon around a black hole. Again, this is the ability to use a lot of our analysis or tools to give us a visual imagery of what black holes look like in the world. And that's then helping human beings to be able to better grasp those kinds of things and to deal with them. You find the same thing in the areas of physics. Einstein, the famous thought experiment he did where he put himself on a beam of light and transported himself, and he could see where it was blue light and when it was red light, when it was going away and coming before, and he could use that as a basis in his imagination to think about what relativity meant, what the speed of light actually meant in terms of actual physics of what actually is happening. Because the numbers are one thing, the equations and calculations are one thing, but you still reach a point where the innate imagination of a human being is required in order to be able to make those leaps and to get to better and deeper understandings and grasps and comprehension. So that's really why traditional standard note-taking doesn't work as effectively, and why children are innately using systems that innately do work for them. Okay, so at this point I just want to talk a little bit about mind mapping for one of the examples, which is about studying. And with studying, they've really found that there's two main areas, well, there's a couple of areas where recall is best. And so recall is at the top there with time going on. So primacy, that first bit of information that you get. You have a primacy component, and so you retain some of that for a longer period of time. Then imagination, association, and unique things, such as a visual image or a pop-up or a strange sound that may hit you. All of those things increase the level at which you'll recall something. And then at the very end of things that you may be reading or studying or learning about, recency, the very last thing you came across, that comes across as at the end. So any questions on this? Is that good? Is that okay? A bit heavy?
No, it's good.
Is that okay? Okay.
You know, I don't want to take a step back, but I was just curious how you were referring to the neurology of it all and how a mind map depicts a neuron and neural networks. And I don't know if Uzan or anybody else has made any comment about how the examples of mind maps you've given us happen to look like neurons.
Yeah. Well, on the neuron level, I can't really say much. I will say on the synthesia front, he's made a lot of movement, and they're trying to do more. So that's the actual sounds, the actual images, so the whole holographic side of it. They're trying to add as much input of that information as they can. But on a neuron level, I couldn't really say much at this point.
I'm sure,
but I'll find out more and get back to you. There must be something. Okay. So that's about recall. Okay, and so then we hit a break. And this is really the first mind map I would probably give for practitioners. And in this mind map for practitioners, I lay out the rules. And the rules are very clear, and they're there for a specific reason. The first rule is really have a central image. Now, to make that image stick, we normally have three colors, and that's to make that image central. And it represents a key word. In this case, the rules of the mind map, so the rules. Now, that's kind of the key word. Then you have a thick branch, and then the branches get thinner after that. They're organic, they radiate. Now the whole neurology behind this is that's how people think. When you go out into the garden and you see that amount of information and it's more than, say, in a library, your brain doesn't explode. And the reason for that is, as human beings, you naturally take in the countryside, nature, the trees, the rivers, the flowers, the branches. You naturally think in colors. You think curvilinear, you think branches. And because of that, it's much more appealing and easier for a human being to work with than with a linear note-taking structured approach. Yes?
Makes sense.
Cool, makes sense? And we try and keep the length of each of the branch, the size of the keyword. And the reason we do that is, if you have a thought and it's a keyword, you want to keep it as close to the next thought or keyword, so the visual image in your head is as close to it as you possibly can. And you want to put in as many end visual pictures as you can as well, because the brain catches it quicker. And it sticks quicker if it's a visual image as well. So you want to put in as many images as you can throughout the whole mind map. And so they also have to be connected. And so they radiate out. And they're the length of each word, and they're connected. So it's one word per branch. And this goes into the detail of why it's one word per branch. Because sentences imprison the brain into thinking down a specific route. And I've seen this myself in my career as a project manager. And this is an actual great example of an example of that. I'll go into a meeting. it's an unsuccessful product launch. That's what they've said, and they've mapped it out in that way. All of a sudden, we've gone down a way of thinking, and we're already approaching it from that view. However, that isn't the way it is. Another alternative approach in a mind map is to look at the product, then you look at the launch. Was it successful? Was it unsuccessful? And by viewing it in this way, what that gives you is creative alternative approaches to doing it. And it gives your brain options in different ways of tackling the same thing. So here what you had was only one way of looking at it. It's an unsuccessful product launch. Okay guys, what do we do now? Here, you're not saying that. So we want to launch a product. Was it successful? It was unsuccessful, and this is what happened. But if it had been successful, these are the other things that could have happened. Or if we'd have caught it at this point, these are the things we could have done. So all of a sudden, you creatively have options. Well, look, we can still do X, Y, and Z over here. We can still do that thing over there. What we need to remediate is here. But here, all you're talking about is remediation. So this is a very different way of looking at it. And if you look at this now, you then see how they've done that. They've said, okay, there was a product market, there was a target. Did we hit the target anyway? Okay, we're okay. What do we need as a target? Well, if it was unsuccessful, there's guess. If it's successful, it's unsuccessful. Well, we're going to mess around with the release. We're going to have to speak to the media. We're going to have to do damage control, alternative news control, whatever. What about catering? Oh my God, we forgot all about that. This process is allowing you to think about a lot of things that you may have missed out in the process. And then, what was the location? What did it look like? Things like that. So this way, you get more options and opportunities to resolve, fix, creatively think about the overall thing. And it lessens the stress level, because you've got a lot more you can look at overall, as well as doing the actual mitigation of what that release meant and what the target looks like. And you're looking at it visually in one shot. So the 2-3 main things that you're concerned about are all represented in one place, in one mind map. And that's kind of its key unique thing that's really useful here. So the next bit is words. One keyword only per branch, because the brain thinks in that central visual image, and visual image is off it. And then the size, the center is very big. So depending upon the size of the paper, it can be a fist, or it can be the size of a little round circle. If it's A3 or if it's A2. A2 would be a fist. And A3 would be just like that. A4 would just be a round circle, like the size of a little kind of OK sign. And then the importance of color. This is just to graphically illustrate how important color is to the human brain, and how neglected it's been over the last century. If you look at a tube map of London without the colors, and you just look at the hues and the contrasts, it's very hard to be able to tell how to get from one place to the next. Whereas if you color it up, all of a sudden you can see, Tariq lives on Gants Hill on the central line here. I'm over here at Tottenham Court Road. I need to just jump on the northern line, come down to Tottenham Court Road, and then I'll just go east all the way, and I'll get to Gants Hill. And you see it immediately, because your brain is a patterning system, and it sees that red line, it follows it all the way through from one end to the next. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to catch this information. And so that's the kind of thing where color has played the same role as it does in nature, where you normally see this kind of thing. So that's the importance of color. So then you have color, you use links, and you use colors throughout. And once you have a mind map with the 3 colors, and you use a branch of a certain color, the branches may get thinner, you may have more colors, but you stick to that one color all the way down that branch. Because your patterning of your brain, these are the little nuance points that make a big difference to people. If they don't follow it through, it breaks the logic in your brain, because the colors have changed all of a sudden. So your flow of thought unconsciously to pick it all up changes. And as you go through this creative process, you're a little bit deeper in your alpha, so you're naturally picking this up. Okay. So then we move on to the key word. So it's always in the center. It's 3+ colors. It has to be fun. You can code it up with your own set of code. You can put a bit of dimension, symbols throughout. And in the next couple of software pieces, we're now adding different pictures, different photographs, different sounds. You can add different things in there, different video clips you can add in for a different thing that you're doing. So you can put those details in as well. Okay, so if I asked you to count the dots, you have 10 seconds. Yeah, it's 10. 10 seconds. But if I asked you, how many dots did you see? And yet if I asked you to do it here, how much quicker would it be? And that's, yeah. And that's only because you know, we can, straight away you know, that's 5 there. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 times 6, 30. And so you catch it a little bit quicker because it's been patterned, and your brain naturally works in a patterning manner. Okay, so the last bit is the structure. And this is where you have arrows going around to all the different bits, where different bits join up with different keywords and ideas. You have a hierarchy, you get this radiant thinking process. You can order them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you have more and more issues coming off a certain thing. And the basic ordering in ideas, structure is there. So this represents the basics of how you do a mind map. Okay, so this is normally where, for practitioners, they have a go at doing a mind map, and they would use those principles to do it. And then it's lunch. Which is good because you get to eat, right? So but we've eaten, and we've had coffee, so we're okay. So it's good. So we can move on. So back to the recall graph. This is really important because once you've done all this work and you've developed all these mind maps and you have all of this, how do you ensure that it's available to you when you need it for presentations, for business briefings, or for study techniques, or for passing exams for the kids? How do you ensure that they're able to recall all this information correctly? It's great to have these great mind maps that you understand, that are comprehensive, but there's also a frequency in terms of the way the brain works to do this. And this recall goes through what those frequencies are with these channels. So when you look at, I'll just go, these are all mind maps, so I'll just go straight to the recall. Okay, so recall, where is it? Right. So the way the brain works is you need frequencies of studying, and you need to cover it a certain time. So once you've learned something and you've done this, if tomorrow you were to spend just 10 minutes on it, and then a day after spend another 10 minutes, but then a week later spend another 10 minutes, and then a month later spend another 10 minutes, because that was the agreed frequency in the beginning, and then 3 months later do another 10 minutes. And if I email you and you do that with this mind mapping program that we're doing, your recall level increases up to 75 to 80%. So that's how your frequency of recall is working. So if they're studying a subject and they're studying geography, that 10 minutes that they're doing on a certain topic, if they do it within that frequency period, they're going to retain 80% of what they will need for geography. So that's that. So the ideal study period breaks up into 20 minutes of study. So first of all, they recommend exercise, 5-10 strenuous minutes of exercise before you start studying. Get your blood pumping, heart working, and your mind really revving up, and then you go and start studying for 20 minutes. Then you have breaks, and then you have 30, 40, 15-minute slots and with relaxations, and then you go back to the front. So as long as you have these 30-minute slots, and then you're having these 5-10-minute breaks, and then you're going back, that's really the ideal study hour. So what this is really detailing here is more about the overall process of how mind mapping works and all the other things you can do to work with it. So that's about the actual mind mapping process, drilling down the detail, speed reading, improving your speed reading and concentration periods, and how you review the information, the main points, reviewing all of it, and then practicing it. Creating the mind maps, reviewing the mega mind maps, relaxing, and then actually sitting an exam or something like that. So that's actually it. I mean, but just before I go on, what I'd like to do as an exercise is I'd like to just show you a mind map and then just ask you to kind of, if you can see for yourself the kinds of different things that are going on there. So if we just talk about that a bit, can you see how so this is really trying to decode for yourself what a mind map is. You can see in the middle, it's about living things. So it's about living. So what does it mean, living? Well, it's got a picture of a man there, plants, maybe fruits at the back. So what's it talking about? Well, it's talking about the environment, protection of the environment, adaptation, habitats, things like that. Now with a mind map, you'll realize that if you go the other way, it should always make logical sense to you. If you start at the end and you go all the way back in, it will make sense. It's waste, the breakdown of, it's beneficial for microorganisms in the environment, for living creatures. So when you go back, it should have some sense. So the movement of animals are processes that living things go through. So each time you go backward, it should also make sense as well. And so you can see they've got that one color here, one color there, big branches, and you can see with this big branch here, processes, animals, movement, nutrition, growth, and you can see they're all bunched there, and then it all refers to, the same thing refers to plants. So animals are there, plants are there, but it's saying that for plants, all of those things also apply. And then you have environment. And here it's got living, a man, an animal, a cat, and it talks about the health of all of these things, and it talks about diet, function, care. It's got a tooth there, effects, all the different types of effects that health can have if you have a drink, if you have a cigarette, if you take drugs, about exercise, and about circulation in the heart. And you can see how a heart's been put in there to give you that visual image. So it's kind of like striking you. And so you can always go back with all of these things as well. That's clearly a skeleton, that's movement, and living, and all, these are all the creatures, and that's the living thing. So that's kind of how it works. So what I reckon would be so that's pretty much the principles of mind mapping, and why we believe it's so effective, and how you can use it for the different things. Any questions before we do a little bit of this?
It seems as if it's always done with a certain objective in mind, right? To explore how one can reach a certain goal. Or is it done for pure exploratory purposes as well, just to see where the mind goes or wants to go?
Yeah, for pure exploratory purposes, for where the mind wants to go, or what the mind is developing and creative at the time. A lot of these things, in terms of even the training course that I'm giving here today, are very results-based, goal-focused things on studying or business. But I don't want to leave it like that. Because there really is that other side of it, which is the creative endeavor, the development, the exploration for whatever a human being wants to do. You should be very easily able to sit down with a pen and paper, as children do, with all the different colors, and pick anything that you want to look at or think about and work on. It doesn't necessarily have to have a thing in mind. It could be the creative process where you're trying to figure something out. It could be the creative process where you're writing a story or a skeleton or poem. So it can be highly creative endeavors. And it can really be whatever a person wants to do. And in that sense, mind mapping is just a visual, in the same way as, if somebody was to paint a picture or to design something. It's a similar kind of philosophy. So though we tend to have this approach which is very results-based, it needn't be. It may creatively lead to something results-based, but it didn't need necessarily start that way. So if you give me an example of something you were thinking about.
Well, as a coach, I would be interested to know how mind mapping may serve the coaching process in terms of how it can be helpful to the client.
Okay. So in that, so basically I could give you a couple of examples. So for example, I have a client that I've been coaching, and I've got to find it now. That's always a fun bit. So basically, in terms of coaching, where is it? Okay, so this is one where I've got a client, and I've basically provided a mind map to help him coach his career. So you've got the client in the middle. He's come to me and he said to me, these are my challenges. And he's talked about the people in the different corporations, the sales, the decision makers, the technology, and the complexity of the technology. Here you've got a rooted timeline of all that he needs to do. And that's clear in his head in terms of how he needs to go to market, what he needs to launch for his products. So I'm coaching him really for business performance in his career in IT. And here are his goals that he's given me. He's told me the things, and on the goals front, from a coaching perspective, I've broken it into physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and interpersonal. And in those areas, we've identified the areas that he's working on and where he needs to go deeper. We've also identified the areas interpersonally, which then linked in with a red marker in many different areas, which we then identified to help him with that skill level that he wants to develop, and the courses he wants to do with communication and sales and Dale Carnegie and all the rest of it. So that was picked up there. Then we went into feedback. Then we took from the goals the things that he talked about, the skills he felt he needed for communication, and the books he felt he needed to read, and we listed those, the training courses he needed, the care he needed to give to himself, the presentations he wanted to do, all the different things of who his mentors were, taking them out for coffee, rooting back into the interpersonal skills where he's developing his mentors for communication, and the decision makers in the company, rooting back to communication and interpersonal over here. And so through this process, I'm able to give him areas in which we've identified that as a coach, I'm working with him to get accountability, to develop those areas, to develop on that timeline, whatever he says, he needs to eventually achieve his future market launches for his products, for his company, and for his sales partners. So this is a clear example for a client where that's done. We'll have to remove his name. Okay, so that's one there. And so this is another one where I've done that for myself, where I've talked about my mission, what success means to me. So this is coaching myself with this mind mapping process. To be all I can be, how to practice, processing how I think and work and how I need to use that. And then for me, my daily mental, emotional, spiritual, physical areas, all of those areas and what they mean. And then my program of coaching that I'm developing with the next smaller steps, the daily things, what they look like, rooting back in here, what those little daily steps are, what the 7-day, 14-day, 21-day, and then how they're kind of revolving back around themselves. And then on here, visually, I'm going to start gridding this so that they can start moving up and down in all the different physical, mental, emotional things that they need. And here, actually, this one is the daily goal setting wheel. That's a 24-hour map broken down that I work with clients on to tell me what they're going to do in terms of emotion, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, whatever they may be, on a daily basis, the 10-minute, 15-minute, whatever slots that they're daily doing. So this is a visual depiction which then goes back into that daily start here, which then goes back into the 7-day, 14-day, 21-day. And through this process, they can measure themselves and gauge how well they're doing and go back and forth as they need to in all those different areas. And the reason I like to do this kind of visual coaching process for clients is because I think it's very important for them to look at all aspects of their lives comprehensively. So even if they come to me with business performance goals, from an ethical and moral perspective, I think it's important for me to ensure that I look at all areas, or at least identify, if they want to, in all spheres of their life, what they want to do. Because it may be that they'll identify something on the relationship front that may take more priority, or on the health front that may take more priority. And this is a way of ensuring that I capture all of those areas as well. Of course, we've got the needs and values elicitation form and things like that with ASC, which we'll also use. But that's an adjunct to this process to try and give them kind of like daily tools that they can stick up on their mirror or look at, that they're constantly kind of updating themselves with. Another one that I've got is my personal breakthrough one, which is somewhere. But then there's also the retreat one. This is the project management one that I'm doing. So this is the retreats and how that's looking. These is the timeline information of how all of those things are working, and visually how I'm achieving those things. Is this the PBI? Yeah. So this was one that we did, I think this was in June. This is a bit of a mess, but it gives you an idea of what my personal breakthrough intensive for me was. So this is after 5.5 hours working with Jovan Dingali on authentic self-empowerment, personal breakthrough intensive. What we looked at the personal breakthrough intensive in terms of a daily. So this was the daily breakdown of all the things in 5-10 minute slots that I'm looking at to develop myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and interpersonally. And you can see on the mental front, I have many, many different things from reading, communication, learning, open awareness. That whole area is developing there. And then on the physical side, all the areas I need to develop in terms of drinking, water, juice, exercise, doing jummi, doing different exercises. And here the emotional front, the negative states, the positive states, what the triggers look like, and how to develop myself emotionally to have stronger muscles, and how that all relates back into other things. And here the spiritual thing for me, which was all about my religious practices and how I was going to develop that and what that is. So that's, for me, all of that area. And then interpersonal, the communication areas, the shadow integration piece came out, how I'm going to have a peer-to-peer coach, how I'm looking at different sides of myself, the dark side, controlling it, managing it, understanding myself, communication, compassion, how I think, how I work. So all of those things are kind of documented in a kind of gestalt, in a comprehensive way, in one picture that I can look at and I can identify over time to improve myself. So that's another example where I've used the coaching process to then work on myself and to develop a set of tools which I can then work with as a coach with clients.
Excellent.
Yeah. Any questions?
So I'm just wondering, once you've done the mind map, I mean, obviously you can add to it and it evolves and changes, right? So what do you normally, would you just do it in one session? Do you do part of it? Do you recommend returning to it? And when you mentioned doing something for 10 minutes and then the next day for 10 minutes and then a month later for 10 minutes, were you talking about the mind mapping then, or was that just studying and learning in general?
That's about studying and learning in general.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
But if you had a documented mind map, or you have something that you've got that you want to constantly review, so you have that level of frequency, you could use it for that if you wanted. And you could also develop the mind maps into different ways. For example, when we look at this one, or we look at ones here, which are my overall goals, and you look at, say, for example, nutrition. At some point, I've broken off nutrition and I've created a whole new mind map now. And I'm just in that world and that space. And so this is represented a document and a snapshot in time for what it's meant to be. And it can be later on, as a document, be updated. But at the same time, for specific pieces that you want to do, whatever those bits are, you could make a new mind map from that. And then move on as you develop that piece of work and go on. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And there are other tools, lots of mind mapping tools now. You've got the iMindMap software, which I showed you earlier, which you can use. And it's great because you keep it on your computer, it's on the cloud. And the same with your phone. You get the iMindMap software or any other one that you want. You can save them on the cloud. Wherever you go, they're accessible. And it means that you can clear a lot of the logjam of a lot of things you're thinking about. You can use lists, you can make notes, but you can also mind map it off your head and get it out of your head. One of the ways I do this is through my daily life. We had 4 kids, three nurseries and 4 properties and extremely aging parents and charity interests and stuff. So for us to develop all those things and to do all of them, the only way for me, I've found so far that's been effective is actually the mind mapping process. Where you look at it, and so with this, what I'm able to do is I can add and remove as I want. And I think we talked about this yesterday, as you talked about some of your non-profit interests and how you wanted to develop that side of your activities. And so for me, doing TILT, Teams Improve Lives Together, my charity, which I'm registering with the Charity Commission, that's really important. And it's very easy when you get caught up with all these other business interests and career interests down here, where a lot of people lose the thread of a lot of things that they're doing. But in this process, I'm able to ensure that I complete everything. So I've got all my technology interests, the things I'm doing in the future, the reading, the travel, and what that's going to look like in terms of perimeter work and in terms of Institute of Physics in London and things like that. But I've also got my entrepreneurship, the things I'm doing within education, with mind mapping, the teaching, the nursery schools, all those kinds of things are coming in. And then also my background, qualifications and career. And you can see how my mission is also listed here with all the different areas and how I see this as a quest for developing myself and helping other people develop themselves. And I've got my retreats, ASE stuff. So I've added those as I came on here because I'm like, okay, now this is now coming more and more to the fore of my mind. These are things I need to drill into a little bit. So you can snapshot this as a document, but you can also remove and add things as you need to drill into it. And then of course, that whole ASE piece there breaks off into other pieces. This is the Terzo di Danciano mind map, on which we're all members of, and which by the end of it, Luca will put something, I will put something, everybody will just put a little bit, and we'll have a mind map there of something that visually each of us has contributed to and come in at different angles and added something which is greater than the parts. So the whole is therefore greater than the parts. So that goes to show you the kinds of creative ways we can develop in. We talked about accommodation today. Accommodation came on there, and all the different options and opportunities, and pricing and retreats and all those kinds of things. So even this was even an earlier one I started. Priorities, timelines, launching, costs, what that all looked like, what the activities would look like. So all of these things are then going to break off into something else that would be distributed amongst us and something that we can all add to. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that bit in terms of, it's one thing where we all talk on the phone. It's another thing where we all make notes. It's another thing when Donna says, okay, these are all the things we should do, and we all agree and disagree or add to them and we tick them all off. But this process is more creative in its approach, and it allows us to take more of an outside creative approach to what we're doing. And by looking at this, you can add anything you want on there. And by all being in there and clicking in, it's a little bit more of a mind meld of different people and different ideas coming in creatively. And as I said before, unlike these other things, so for example, we talked about how you like to work with your hand, you like to write, and that whole process. So the hand-eye coordination thing is really important as a cognition tool for most people, especially of 25 plus. I think for 25 under, it's probably a different process, and it would be more software-based approach, software and hardware type of systems approaches for them. But for us, these approaches are still very valid, and they are also, we believe, in terms of the Tony Buzan organization, the most fluid, creative, flexible, and adaptable, because they allow the greatest amount of, they're the most intuitive for human creativity in terms of what you can do, because the constraints of software and hardware systems are so much more. But sometimes those constraints can lead to different types of creativity, but that's a different discussion. So that's really it. So really, to wrap up for me, that's it really. Leaving everybody with the main organizing tools, and then just leave this map on there with a bunch of coloring pens, and people can just have a go and take a branch off on a topic using the rules and put whatever they want on there. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.